we go. I'm just going to repeat that. I'm Amy Coco, Chair of the Boston Society of Architects Committee on the Environment, and happy Earth Day. Today, I'm glad to present a panel of architects and designers on the AIA Architecture and Design Materials Pledge, signing on and reporting. There are continuing education units available, one AIA Learning Unit HSW, and a form will be posted in the chat for direct reporting to the AIA or a certificate if you're not AIA. This meeting is being recorded, and we're excited for the BSA to be a resource for BSA Committee on the Environment to be a resource for you in your AIA Materials Pledge journey. We have some upcoming BSA COTE events. The AIA conference is in Boston this year, so there are several sustainability events going on, and I just want to highlight 4 here. Climate Action by Design is at the Omni Seaport on Thursday evening. There's a COTE Open Forum, which is free at 11 a.m. on Thursday, June 5th. There is an AIA 2030 and Materials Pledge Open Forum on Friday, June 6th at 11. And then Friday night, the BSA Open House is from 5 to 7. And it would be great if BSA COTE could sign up for that. We have COTE national folks coming to join us too, so it'd be really nice to connect. We have the Sustainable Urban Design Handbook authors and reviewer Tim Beatley coming this summer, August 26th, for a virtual book talk. And in September, we have a daylighting symposium that we're organizing with the Revit Users Group, the Building Enclosure Council, and the Sustainability Education Committee. So hopefully we'll connect with you at those events. It being Earth Day, we want to take a moment to celebrate that the AIA has a Spring into Action campaign. Architecture is about stability, innovation, and resilience. But right now, uncertainty in government policies and funding decisions is threatening the profession, our firms, and the communities we serve. Architects cannot afford to wait and watch. Now is the time to spring into action. Throughout spring, AIA members will engage with legislators at the federal, state, and local levels to advocate for policies that protect and promote architectural businesses, design excellence, sustainable and resilient communities, and access to housing. Your voice matters. Take action now. And Katie is graciously adding these links into the chat as we go.
I'm Katie Gaspard. I'm an associate with SOM Architecture, and I'm also on the advisory committee for the BSA COTE. And I'm going to be introducing our 3 speakers today, as Amy mentioned. So starting off with Amy. Amy Sheehan Latva-Coco is the chair of the BSA Committee on the Environment and the director of sustainability at DSK, doing Schmid Kearns in Concord, Massachusetts. Amy is an architect licensed in Massachusetts and California, a certified passive house designer, and a lead building design and construction professional. Next, we have Jody Thill from Flad Architects. Throughout more than 20 years of experience working and teaching, sustainability has been a common thread that weaves together Jody's work, personally and professionally. In her role as a sustainable design specialist, she applies her background in interior design to find solutions for both materials and systems that have a lighter footprint, while also creating inspiring spaces for people to research, heal, and innovate. Her passion for creating spaces that improve lives, coupled with her understanding of green building concepts, sustainable building rating systems, and the commercial green building industry, make her a valuable resource to both clients and staff. She asks and seeks out answers to critical materials questions about carbon, chemicals of concern, installation, maintenance, and circularity. She thinks not only of building occupants, but those who are impacted by every step of a material's life. And lastly, we have Nareda Rodriguez. Nareda has dedicated her career to advancing sustainable design practices that prioritize environmental preservation, conservation, and the well-being of building occupants. Her work expands decades of working on large and small-scale projects that focus on creating human health-centered spaces. Together with her colleagues, her firm, NDS Architects, is continually working to strengthen its commitment to sustainability through the selection of materials that can contribute to a more just society and reduce the use of harmful ingredients. And as Amy mentioned at the beginning, I'm going to be dropping in the link for people to receive continuing ed credits or a certificate for attending. So just keep an eye on the chat, and I'll also be posting links to some of the resources that the presenters mentioned throughout.
And thank you so much, Katie. And this is whereby is a new platform for folks. So there is a mic. Everyone doesn't come in by default on mic. So if you can just check if your mic is muted, that'd be great. Thank you. So the AIA Materials Pledge is such an important thing that we've signed up to. DSK we signed in December, and I'm going to tell you how we came to that point to sign on and what we've been working on. So we're located in Concord, Massachusetts, and we have a small office also in South Dartmouth. We are about 35 people of architects, interior designers, and planners. We work across various types of buildings, higher ed, institutions, residences, retail, restaurants, infrastructure, and we're in New England, New York, North Carolina, and the Caribbean. Of the three panelists presenting today, we are the most recent, as Nareda and Jody will speak about their history, longer history with the Materials Pledge. When we signed in December, it was about 300 firms had signed. I'm going to tell you how we got here, and hopefully you'll see a path to do the same with your firm. So what is the AIA A&D Materials Pledge? The overall goal is to reduce the impact of construction on 5 impact areas: human health, I just realized that background, you can't see my thumb, social health and equity, ecosystem health, climate health, and moving towards a circular economy. So on the right, you see a template letter that the AIA has provided. They wrote a new one this year. And in that letter, we said we would do 3 things. We would report our firm's progress to the AIA, akin to what one does with AIA 2030, update our sustainability action plan to include action items specific to materials, and review how progress is being tracked. So this fall was the first round of reporting, and there is a report out on that, and Nareda will be speaking a bit to that. And this year is the second round of reporting. It began in February, and it goes to the end of May. So in 2018, we signed on to the DSK, we signed on to AIA 2030 to report our predicted energy use of our buildings. A few weeks ago, we submitted our portfolio for the 7th time. As part of that effort, we wrote a sustainability action plan which focuses on project milestones during design and construction and various goals. For example, one goal was to conduct whole building life cycle analysis on one of our projects, and now we have 2 projects that have done so. For our island work, we have developed a sustainability wheel, and with our sustainability action plan, we crosswalked that to the framework for design excellence 10 impact categories of integration, community, ecology, water, economy, energy, well-being, resources, change, and discovery. Our wonderful interiors team said, well, we want SAP. So they developed this healthy materials guide, and they collected best practices specifically focusing on materials, both from institutional projects and from our residences, and made recommendations and really focused around the human health impact of materials. And one goal within our Healthy Materials Guide was to sign the Materials Pledge. So it's great that we have now come to do so. A useful document for me as I was getting the firm ready for this was the red on the left Materials Pledge Starter Guide, which the AIA published in 2021. The one on the right is from 2024, the Materials Pledge Reporting Guide, and that is also helpful now we're in this reporting phase. So as I was building a case for us to sign, I marked up this list, 5 steps for preparing your firm. 1, update your sustainability or climate action plan to reflect the pledge statements. And so this is just my screen grab of my copy of this as I was marking it up in Bluebeam. So it's in progress. 2, create or refresh your firm's materials library and policies. So that's ongoing as we do that, and developing questions that we can ask reps and vendors as they come in. And our Healthy Materials Guide also informs that. The 3rd one is make materials and product selections based on pledge categories. And we have a materials tracker in CA to kind of close that loop that we're working on. But as we fold things into specs, and Nareda and Jody are going to really speak to that. Number 4, build literacy and train employees about materials at your firm. And we have a program called DSKU where people can dive deep on a subject and then bring it back to the firm and teach that class. And I work with them to get the learning objectives and the HSW approval with the AIA so that then attendees can get credits for the course. And number 5 is encourage conversations with manufacturers, vendors, clients, contractors. And so having those conversations make a significant difference. So making the case to sign on, some of the things that happened for us were the summer before last, we had an intern, Sophia Fonseca, who wrote a brief white paper that was edited by Monica Lopes on the Caribbean circular economic future. And this focuses on the 6 R's: reduce, reuse, repair, remanufacture, recycle, and recover. And this transition towards these will assist many of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And so that is really the circular economy part of the AIA Materials Pledge. So, okay, we're really thinking about that already. And this being to say that there are probably things in your firm that you're doing, if you haven't signed the pledge, that you're doing that you can identify as, oh, we're already in that area looking at that, investigating it. Last summer, these 2 slide captures on the left that say Big River Steel, Arkansas, and Concrete Sustainability Council, those are 2 slide grabs from some research that, well, I was the one who presented this, but it was within our social and racial justice discussion group. And these came out of looking at environmental justice communities and what the impacts were of material production. And so we were looking at the social health equity part of the Materials Pledge. And we're learning things like what responsible steel certification is, and the Concrete Sustainability Council, what it is. So furthering that, we started to look at social life cycle analysis. The Ponzio, an Italian manufacturer, studied their bifold doors and looked at the raw material sources for their doors with a very scientific study. Authors are listed there on that screen grab. And they were able to look at the worker, basically there are health indicators and community indicators and well-being indicators for those that are studied within the field of social life cycle analysis, and looking at their sources from Russia, Egypt, and Mozambique. And so it's kind of exciting to know that there is a whole field that is doing that. I had not been aware of that. And it ties right into, so that is the SHDB that you see here next to the Grace Farms, the sweet little hummingbird, that's the logo of Grace Farms. And so we began exploring with our colleagues to ask, research, and document, and select. That's kind of the process. Continuing, we looked at ecosystem health and climate health. And my colleague Grace Pilkington and I taught a class on this subject for materials. And again, a similar ask about require, EPDs, identify, and specify. That is the process for these. Again, within the product type reporting, where there's human health, climate health, circular economy, social health and equity, and ecosystem health, what are those different certifications that we want to be specifying? And so these are screen grab. This one on the left, a screen grab, and then the one on the right is a drawing by my colleague Leanne Doherty, looking at taking the design framework for excellence and saying, well, within human health, that first column on the left, where does it impact the AIA framework for design excellence? And it's resources, well-being, community, and integration all tie into human health. And one way we are getting informed is to do something like listen to a webinar from the folks at Habitable, which was formerly Healthy Building Network. And these are some screen grabs from their website on the left. If you're not already familiar with their research tool, Informed, it's incredibly valuable, where we just basically, very easy concept, we want to move out of the dark red as we can up towards the green. So this is analysis of fire protection. And then on the right, they had presented a webinar of their research on plastics in construction. And pretty astounding that our carpet, the industry in the US each year, that we have significant amounts of plastic discarded each year, summing up to the same equivalent as our plastic water bottles, bags, and straws. So their Habitable is doing great research. So using staying informed with them is a great tool. But we'll gather around our big table and watch one of those together. And so we want to be moving towards models that restore nature and support communities. So in sum, how to get started with the Materials Pledge, go ahead and Google AIA Materials Pledge. Catherine, thank you so much for dropping those links into the chat. You can go to get the Materials Pledge Starter Guide, that's the red one, and then the reporting one is the green one. And I highly recommend joining the Materials Pledge peer-to-peer network on the AIA Community Hub, and you can, it says emailing us, but you can email the AIA there, materials@aia.org. That's a really helpful resource. And then the reporting has begun, and we have later in the presentation, we have a close-up of this last one. So with that, I will hand it off to Jody.
Thanks so much, Amy. So SLAD is a firm, we're about 95 years old and have 10 offices across the country, including one in Boston. And we signed the AIA Materials Pledge in 2022 after having signed the AIA 2030 commitment as well. We also have our own structural, so they are part of the SE 2050. So we weren't unfamiliar with the reporting piece, but when we signed the Materials Pledge, reporting was not yet a requirement. So I appreciate the thoroughness that Amy's gone through in the analysis as they were signing on. But what we really wanted to do in signing the pledge was understanding our own impact, make a case for doing better, and really work on influencing where we could in the industry. So if you move to the next slide, please. This is just a quick history of where the Materials Pledge fits in our sustainability journey. So FLADS has had a commitment to sustainability long-term. We were a founding member of the USGBC and helped to pilot the new LEAD program way back in the day. And so it seemed like a good fit to sign on to the Materials Pledge, understanding what our impacts were and understanding where we could do better. There's certainly, I would say that if you are concerned of this is a lot of work to report, it isn't, and it's really an important factor in changing the industry. It's amazing in all of the talk that we had in preparation for this. It's amazing to see where the industry has come and how quickly, even in the past couple of years, there's significantly more information than there has been in the past in being able to evaluate on the 5 categories or 5 criteria of the AIA Materials Pledge. So in 2024, the first year that we required reporting, we reported 1 project and its materials as well as our firm progress. And in 2025, we're on track to report 5 projects and their associated materials. So at this point, the only requirement of reporting is to report your firm progress. So just sort of taking a temperature on where you are in understanding what materials are going into your buildings and how you're sort of getting ready to document that, which is a great way to sort of take easier steps into committing to the Materials Pledge and signing on. So this, hopefully all of you are familiar with this. This isn't a profound graphic at all from ThinkLab, but really I think incredibly powerful in thinking about buying power versus specification power. So we are a top 200 firm according to the interior design giants. And this is really one of those things that when we're talking to our own staff, that it really is empowering to think about the impact that we can have. And even being an average specifier just in the industry, having 40 times the spending power that the average consumer does, and the conversations, as I'm assuming you all have, reps that you go and talk to about certain products, the products that they're repping, thinking about the impact that you can have on that manufacturer and therefore on the industry. We've talked about in our own firm and with other firms in the area, have talked about sort of the good aspect of peer pressure and how there's definitely peer pressure around certain areas or certain spec sections as you're talking, and how once one manufacturer in a certain category or certain CSI division has transparency data, how influential that can be to other manufacturers that are competing against them for product. So asking for that transparency data, and we'll talk about that as we go throughout the presentation, is really, really critical. And we can have certainly a pretty outsized impact on the industry overall. So EPD is just, as many of you hopefully are aware, environmental product declarations are very useful tools, even if you're not pursuing a certification for your projects. Originally, the whole point of them was to inform the manufacturers and help them better understand the impact of their products. So I think that's one of the things to think about. I know we talk about how EPDs could be more uniform and how sometimes frustrating they are, but they're a wealth of knowledge as far as information is concerned, and evaluating not only just the embodied carbon impact, but understanding, VOCs and some of the other health impacts of the products. Those really become critical, but the most critical piece of it is that if you ask for EPDs or other transparency data from your manufacturers, it can help them to better understand what the cost, if you will, environmentally of their products and where there are opportunities for them to do better. So as a part of that, we utilize mindful materials. Hopefully you just all saw the link there, and the common materials framework. One piece of that is utilizing EPDs for life cycle impacts or completing LCAs. They both contribute to the AIA 2030 reporting for us, and as well as the AIA Materials Pledge. And so this graphic just kind of gets at, what are the aspects of a life cycle analysis that you can have materials that are analyzed at the cradle to gate, cradle to grave, and cradle to cradle system boundaries, and the modules that are involved. So it really is sort of an all-encompassing piece. It certainly has a carbon as its main focus, but it can work into circularity and a better understanding of the product overall. So we do not have a specific materials action plan, but materials are a part of FLAD's impact reports that we have been publishing. We made a commitment in 2023. We had been publishing it every 3 years as required by the AIA 2030 commitment. And in 2023 made the commitment with signing the Materials Pledge and just understanding overall what we were reporting to have an annual impact report that we are publishing. So with the completion of our 2030 reporting, and once we have our Materials Pledge reporting done for this year, the 2024 impact report will be public on our website. So while we were developing the Materials Pledge information that was going to our internal firm and how we were going to use that, there were really 3 tools that we use at FLAD. I'll be highlighting 2 of them here. So one is the Sustainable Materials Guide. And each page, we don't, it's not all encompassing for every material, but the main materials on our project, so ceilings, insulation, exterior materials. So we use a lot of curtain wall, metal panel, as well as insulation. Each one of those has its own separate page. And the way that we've presented the Sustainable Materials Guide is that we have a good, better, best scenario. So we do have materials listed for those sort of in a good, better, best. And we don't necessarily always have a material selected for each of the three of those, but do want to be transparent about what we are recommending to our staff. But in addition, and what you see here is that we make sure that we are highlighting the environmental impacts of that material, any health concerns, so materials out in the marketplace, what are potential challenges or things that we should be aware of, and what are other things to keep in mind. So if there are different options to any given material, what are the things that we should be paying attention to, and what are the things that staff should be avoiding when selecting these things. So the Sustainable Materials Guide is one. A second is that we have a healthier materials library in our product specification database. So that's a database that was originally started as a communication tool with our specification writers, and we have been able to create templates around healthier materials. So asking staff to pay attention that there are HPDs or EPDs or declare labels for those materials, and being able to communicate that with the spec writer so that when they are putting that forward, we can pull out in our technical sections what we want the contractor to provide as part of their submittals in the CA process for our projects. And lastly, we developed, right after signing the Materials Pledge, we developed our own Healthier Materials library letter to manufacturers. So thank you to MSR in Minneapolis, who was the influence for this letter for us. But basically what we did was, pulled forth that we had signed the AIA Materials Pledge, and that in this letter, we've noticed, we're putting them on notice of our public commitment, what those 5 aligned areas of impact are, or the buckets, and then asking manufacturers in partnership with us to share the information that they have in relation to transparency, social responsibility, any EPDs that they'd have for their products, if they're working to eliminate red list chemicals, avoiding generally harmful ingredients based on the 6 classes, providing VOC testing data if they had available, and what their end-of-life material plans were. And really wanted to communicate that this wasn't an ultimatum, but where were they on their journey, and how could they communicate that with us, and we could communicate that further with staff. So understanding that this is a process for all of us, and that everybody is at a different step on their journey, and helping to have transparency and understanding where we all are.
Thank you, Jody. That was awesome. So MDS is a medium-sized firm with about 45 employees. Our company works on higher ed education, K-12, institutional, workplace, and laboratory projects. Next. We've been committed to learning more about what we're putting into our buildings for over a decade. The timeline here shows where we started to get manufacturers to provide us with more transparency. We were early signatories of the Materials Pledge about 6 years ago, and we dedicated time and resources to continue to grow and understand what is available and what needs more information from the manufacturers. Last year, we were among the 92 firms that submitted to the AIA Materials Pledge, and this year we're going to be submitting again with about 3 projects that were completed last year. We're also in the process of revamping our sustainability action plan, and starting to submit the pledge works well within that framework that we're trying to set up for the next 5 years. Next, please. So how do we start? We look at the guidelines that are already provided by the AIA Frameworks for Design Excellence, as Amy had described in her experience at her office. We also look at the Materials Pledge at the beginning of each project. Working with our clients, we start to develop the goals and align them with their values. We've been focusing on the last few years on transparency, embodied carbon, and chemical avoidance. The last one, as you know, is not easy to put our arms around it, and we're always urging clearer information from our manufacturers so that we can easily understand it. Based on what we heard last year at Greenville, there are people working on the easy button to help us all out, so I hope that comes out soon from Mindful Materials. Then we start to look at the selections that we are looking at and break it down by material categories to start a deeper dive. Next, please. Our tools are continually evolving as we start to dig into what we currently understand about a product and utilize what third-party certifications exist that can help us vet it out. We have intake forms, similar to what Jody was just talking about in terms of the letter that we ask all our manufacturers to fill out when they're presenting a material to our company or adding a material to our library. We tell them about our current classes of chemicals that we want to avoid, like the antimicrobials, bisphenol A, phthalates, PFAS, flame retardants, and heavy metals. We're also in the process of developing a detailed material category cards to be used when evaluating materials for any project. These cards will also be updated over time when we get feedback from our staff as they start utilizing them. And the goal for those cards is similar to what Jody was talking about, is sort of having this book of materials, sustainable materials that you can start looking at and what to avoid when selecting those materials. Next, please. So this graphic shows you how one might be able to evaluate a material with the AIA Materials Pledge and review it against the client's requirements, the design performance criteria, and the first and life cycle cost analysis. Our office is involved in a lot of public build projects, so we have to provide this level of scrutiny for 3 equals. Once we evaluate, we can see if it falls within the red to green score, similar to the habitable scorecard that Amy presented earlier. And as we decide if several of our selections fall more towards the red or orange, we need to consider whether replacing it with a material that performs the same or similarly, but because of the composition are more towards the yellow or green categories. Or we can find rooms or areas within the project that, if they're within the red score, that we can allow for a different product altogether that will perform as well or better. Or in some of our projects, we even consider removing the finish itself and exposing the structure and providing a finish that doesn't have PFAS. These are some strategies that we start early in the design process. And we ask our team members to work together to come up with different strategies that help resolve some of these issues. And we are also looking at high impact areas where either cost or size of the impact is greater so that we can address them quickly. Next slide. Of course, we want to make sure all this hard work early in the design phase is clearly documented into our CDs. The chart to the right is an example of what we included in our specifications, in addition to the language in each of the spec sections to clearly illustrate what attributes we're looking to match for each material type, and if substituted, the information needed to illustrate its equal. This work has been spearheaded by our own Director of Interior Design, Sarah Lesher, along with our internal team. They're awesome team players, and they worked really hard to get this done. I also urge you to engage with our contractors that have been working on your projects. They can be your partners and collaborate with you early in the process because they too have team members that are working on healthy materials and provide that level of expertise. Next slide. So for MDS, these are categories that we still have to learn more about and develop the same level of scrutiny that we've done for the health and the cost impact and embodied carbon. We want to we work on renovation projects and adaptive reuse projects a lot. So we want to make sure that these categories are embedded into our process, as we also are committed to all these as part of the pledge. Next slide. For the next steps, we continue to learn and research more Our goal this year is to expand our internal educational programs for our staff and continue to work towards socially conscious manufacturing of construction materials and specify them. There are other areas related to carbon, energy, water, reuse, and waste that we will also be educating our staff about in addition to the Materials Pledge. Next. I also want to say in my last words that I want to encourage you all that if you are still on the fence as to whether or not to sign on to the Materials Pledge, that you can start with small steps, look at the materials that are and the information provided by the AIA while you're thinking about it. And as you're thinking through this, the information that we're providing to you and the work that you're doing probably complements what you're already doing in the firm and hopefully align with the values that you already are thinking about. The Firm Materials Pledge submission is not a large lift, and getting to buy-in from your leadership in your firm can be part of what motivates you to get started. Lastly, I want to say celebrate the champions within your teams. They're the people who are going to help you push this forward and learn more as we're all learning more about materials. And this is, as you know, a fun thing to do with our partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Nareda. Thank you, Jody. We've pulled together some resources here, and Katie's been filling the chat with great resources. But just overall, to sign up for the AIA Materials Pledge, we have that link. There is a report on the 2023 reporting year. Nareda's second to last slide showed a graphic from it that showed the top reporting products that were reported on. There is a AIA Materials Pledge reporting guide. There is a letter from Mindful Materials that can be a template to manufacturers. AIA has open office hours on Material Pledge reporting, so May 15th coming up, and we have a link to register for those. But if you're join that peer-to-peer network, then you'll be getting information on that. The AIA YouTube channel, though, has some great videos on learning. They've recorded meetings where they reviewed pledge information. And MSR has shared their sample material specifics SAP. And so we have that link. Thank you, Katie, in the chat. Just in terms of the project and product level tracking sheet that you can now get at the peer-to-peer network, it's a lot, but there's a pathway there that you can take a product, and it's just gonna that you can go through, and it's indicating a lot of different evaluations and metrics on something, but one product, you're going to be able to find its way through that. And here we've collected a list of tools that we like. Mindful Materials, this one here, doing a lot of background work. Ecomedes also. Building Ease, that's a local Barbara Bachelom. Informed, as we discussed, formerly Healthy Building Network. Declare, so that's Living Futures Institute. You can search by CSI. Cradle to Cradle, of course. The New School Parsons, I think Jody, you said this should be our level setting, that we all just do the Healthy Materials Lab course and that be standard across the industry. And then Design for Freedom, Grace Farms is pulling, there is sample specification language and some resources there. So these are all tools that we like. So we just have a summary of upcoming BSA COTE events on this landing page. And then also lastly, the AIA's Spring into Action campaign, just a reminder on that. So I'll go back up to the resources, but we are happy to answer any questions.
One thing I think that I'm not sure any of us touched on just as far as the materials pledge is concerned, and I think something that maybe I missed in the first year of reporting, but unlike the AIA 2030 reporting, if you're familiar with that, where you report each year that the project is in your office from concept through construction documents, or through CA and construction completion, for the materials pledge, you're only reporting each project once your construction documents have been completed. So that's something else too, where if you're thinking about your portfolio of projects and like, how are you going to manage all these projects? And you only need to report each project that comes through your office once upon completion of construction documents. So you're really reporting the materials that have been designed to go into the project. There have been discussions about in the future, the difference between what gets specified and what actually gets built. But for now, sort of in this snapshot in time, it's just that one opportunity to report each project and get a sense of, where the firm is based on each project that comes through.
Thanks, Jody. I'd just like to point out on Nereda's slide, this is from the report on fiscal year reporting 2023. And so those top three are carpeting, resilient flooring, and acoustical ceilings. And they're the impact categories that are quite large, and human health is really one that I think our field AEC has a really good handle on. Circular economy, that's great that there's carpeting, because the carpeting industry has really been thinking about that, and thinking about the climate health impact. But it's interesting coming back to that informed article, learning about the plastics as we begin to learn about that. And so there's that balancing and that optimizing. And Nereda, you brought up the idea of, are there opportunities where we remove a finish and then we're thinking about the substrate and exposure of that, and when is that appropriate? Because of course, each of those materials has been designed and developed for a reason. It's performing, and so it's an interesting optimization question.
Absolutely. So the products that are, that the people reported on the most are sort of like you said, like the ones that have the most information available, like carpeting. The lighting manufacturers have been working on that, so that's why a lot of people reported on it. You would think that concrete would be up there, but it's not, because I think a lot of people are still trying to figure out what's the better mix and to reduce the embodied carbon of concrete. But any of you who are thinking about it, looking at those finishes like the ceilings, the flooring, and carpet as a starting point is a good way to start if you're thinking about submitting on a particular product for a project.
The other area that we've talked about, and it certainly fits with carpeting and ceilings, but also many other products that are installed in projects. I can think of like whiteboards and tack boards and things that are acoustical wall panels. It's been interesting because as we've started asking questions, adhesives have come into this piece as well, and it's not really something that is specifically related to the materials pledge, but it has, in thinking about circularity and reuse, it has made many of our designers think about how we're specifying how things get installed. So thinking about, can we adhere something, or instead of adhering something, can we mechanically fasten something so that it can be taken off the wall, or thinking about carpet, adhesive dots on carpet tile in appropriate places. Are there places that we can minimize the impact of not being able to reuse something because it was stuck on so well that the adhesive is going to be one of the impediments to having it be circular, or even just being able to be moved or reused in some other manner. So you start thinking about any one of these 5 buckets, and they start to sort of seep into one another, and really is a great opportunity to work with staff and kind of brainstorm ways that you could be doing things or writing your spec differently. as you're going through and analyzing in each of these areas.
Any questions? Quick poll, are there people who are attendees who are signatories or reporting or?
Hey, Amy, I'll ask a question.
Yes, hi Tom.
Hi. When you presented with a small team some of this data, and in particular, I'm just looking at carpet and the impact there, I think people were like, wow, like it's incredible how that jumps off the page. Can you, the panelists, talk about where it's trending? I mean, do you see like making this data tangible that we're starting to see positive trends?
I'll try and answer that. I think it's an important question. So I think the reason, so this was data, I guess about 160 projects reported data on their carpet. Maybe it was an EPD or a health product declaration, or maybe it was a take back program on the carpet. And I think a lot of carpet companies have had to think about it because carpet is something that is replaced quite often. And so the carpet companies, I was working at Harbor Green Campus Initiative back in 2001 and having conversations about take-back programs for nylon 6/6 and recyclability of those. And so I think that industry has been focusing, and so we have that data at our fingertips for many firms. And similarly, resilient flooring is closely tied with acoustical ceilings, and those are finishes that are large areas. And I think that's why people, if we do address those things that were either are very expensive or are high volume or high surface area, those are the ones we want to address first. And so I think that's maybe why those are being assessed.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's possible, if it makes sense between different firms, but to have some shared best practices with regard to client education, that might, and I think it's woven in, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you, that's a really good point.
Tom, to address that a little bit, one of the things that has been interesting is, and where we've found sort of an impediment to getting clients to understand or change, is oftentimes starting with maybe what doesn't seem as interesting is just their cleaning practices, and getting kind of around like, what are their cleaning practices? And we do a lot of lab work, and so we were running into this issue where we have these super performing products that weren't necessarily able to be improved upon, and it made us sort of start asking the question, how super performing do they need to be in every area? So do we need to have a methylmethacrylate floor or an epoxy floor in all sorts of lab areas, or are there areas where they're not necessarily using chemicals or pharmacological materials that would be damaging to the floor? And that sort of started the conversation. Or we do healthcare as well, and it's like, how are they cleaning the floor? And if we go through that process, that can help us better understand what can we put on the floor, because it doesn't necessarily matter what we put on the floor if they're cleaning it in the way that they're cleaning it, and if we put whatever we put on the floor, they're going to clean it however they clean anyway. Just starting to better understand that. So we had an idea of like, maybe we could do a better job of selecting materials that sort of fit all of these criteria and also fit within the bounds of what is really happening in the environment that it's going to work in, without sort of over specifying materials that are beyond what is needed.
Really important. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Julie. Aaron.
Yeah, thanks. This has been really informative. Thank you for the slideshow and for all of the just general discussion. My firm, we signed the Materials Pledge, and I think last year just did the very basic project information over the firm. And I've been asked to, report on 3 projects this year, so I'm a little overwhelmed just with deadlines and other things. Curious about. I had 2 projects that finished construction this past year. Are you discouraging, or is the AIA, is that discouraging using like just taking my cut sheets from my submittals and, whether it's a slight difference from my actual design products, or is there like a firm stand? We want to put the products that are in the construction documents rather than the products that were actually submitted in the construction.
If you've got construction, go for it, I think.
Okay. Any tips for a first timer? Like it's a little nerve wracking trying to think I've got 6 weeks to get this done or 5 weeks.
I think that the Materials Pledge reporting tracker is a little bit overwhelming, to tell you the truth, Aaron. When I looked at it the first time, I was like, what? How many columns can we possibly fill this out on? But I think you can sort of, the project, the product questions, you probably can fill it out fairly easily once you look at the different categories. I have to go through it myself with our team, so I'll let you know if I find any good tips or tricks. We haven't started it ourselves.
Yeah. I heard that it was still like a moving target up until recently, but I don't know if that's still true. Like, have they settled down all the questions that are required?
I thought they had, but that email materials@aia.org is a good one, and the peer-to-peer network is another resource that I'd recommend. And then also, it's not until May 15th, I think, the next office hours, but those would be good to sign up for too, and you can get to that through the peer-to-peer network. But you can also just send an email to them.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to add that the tracker that they provided on Excel, it's only a tool that they want you to utilize as you're sort of gathering information for that particular project or material, but you still have to enter each of the data on the website that they provided to you. So it doesn't transfer the Excel file onto their database, unfortunately.
It's not like a 2030 bulk upload process.
It's not.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Good reminder. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you everyone for attending and your participation. We really appreciate it, and happy Earth Day. And any last words, Narita and Jody?
Thank you. This is a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us, and good luck to everybody who's reporting. We're all in the same boat, so we'll be thinking of each other as we go through the reporting process.
Yeah, and it would be interesting, I think, for BSA COTE to know, which local firms, the report listed which firms reported for 2023, and it'd be interesting to see who locally is reporting and in this, and maybe we can support each other through this process.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Eric. Have a great evening. I'm gonna stop the recording.